Hello and welcome to the part 16 of the GMAT Advanced Target 700 program by Career Karta. Today we are going to see the 16th installment of the verbal series. And today we are going to discuss some questions related to critical reasoning, which is second portion that we are going to cover in this series after reading comprehension. For those of you who want to read our videos on reading comprehension, you can go through parts 1 to 15. Right, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in explaining the different types of critical reasoning questions that come in. We will look through them as we go. In this series, the aim is that we help you boost your score from a 680 or a 650 to a 700 plus, and hence we are going to dive straight into the questions. If you want us to cover some parts of critical reasoning or any theory related to critical reasoning, any understanding related things, just let us know in the feedback to this particular video. So let's jump right in. Now, what will happen in critical reasoning is that unlike reading comprehension, where you had one passage followed by 3 to 4 questions, generally in a critical reasoning question, you will have a short passage which will be followed by either one question or at max 2 questions. It is very rare and has at least not been seen till now that any reading critical reasoning question has more than 2 questions. Though generally most of the critical reasoning questions will only have one question that is associated with the topic. Now, before we look into the different types of questions or what are the different concepts that are tested, there is one thing that I want to tell all of you. And that is the fact that whenever you see a critical reasoning question, before trying to decipher what kind of question this is, what is the technique that I should use and things like that, always try to read the passage that is given there in its rawest form. Okay, and in its rawest form, also try to understand what exactly is the primary underlying message that the passage is trying to give. Okay, and even before you look at the options, just after you have read the passage, form kind of like a reasoning logic that whether you are convinced by the passage or whether you think that something can very strongly go against it, whether it needs some more reasoning to back up, whether some assumptions that you think this guy is talking about are missing, and so on and so forth. Right, so it will actually help you a lot in figuring out the right answer. This is something that a lot of aspirants neglect. As soon as they read the passage, they jump straight into the question. They read the options. Sometimes they get confused with the options. So I would humbly suggest that whenever you read the passage, try to read it in the raw form. Try to understand it in the most basic manner possible, and the reasoning in its simplest form. Okay, so let's look at this particular question. It says that it is often said that high rates of inflation tend to diminish people's incentive to save and invest. This view must be incorrect, however, because people generally saved and invested more of their income in the 1970s when inflation rates were high than they did in the 1980s when inflation rates were low. Okay, so it's a very simple logic for those of you who are exposed to the concept of inflation. I think they would very easily appreciate this particular topic, that the rate of inflation, if it is very, very high, it diminishes people's incentive to save and invest. For those of you who are not familiar with the concept of inflation, let me help you out. So inflation is nothing but the rate at which things around you are appreciating in cost. Okay, so for example, if a basket of goods costed 100 rupees or $100 last year, it is now costing 105. Okay, so what do we say? We say that the inflation is 5%. Okay, and let us say this basket of goods is basically a house. Okay, a house was costing $100 or 100 rupees earlier. Now it is 105. Right now, in case there is no inflation, the price would remain at 100. Okay, now let us say I have $100 or 100 rupees today. What are the choices that I have? Either I can go ahead and buy this house now, or I can put this money in the bank, right? So let us say I put this money in the bank. and the bank is giving me 3% interest. Okay, so what will happen after 1 year? This 100 will become 103. Okay, now if there was no inflation and the house was 100 rupees last year and 100 rupees now, if I invested my money in the bank, after the 1 year I could have gone back, bought the house. Okay, and I would still have 3 rupees or $3 left. Whereas in this case, when there was inflation and it became 105, what will happen? After 1 year, I have 103. Okay. The house costs 105. I'll be in -2. Okay. So this means that if the inflation rate is high, then I do not have a lot of incentive to invest my money in the bank, right? If on the other hand, the interest rate or the inflation rate is low, then I have a lot of motivation to put my money in the bank, right? So inflation erodes the value of money in order to purchase something, okay, in its bare simple form. Okay, so what happens when the inflation goes up? Generally, people invest less. Now, what is the passage trying to say? It is saying that people invested more of their income in the 1970s when inflation rates were high than they did in 1980s when inflation rates were low. Okay, so this is kind of like a paradox, a very clear paradox. Okay, now let's look at the options. Of the following, the best criticism of the argument above is that it overlooks the possibility that, okay, it overlooks the possibility, meaning there are other factors. Right? So there should be a phenomena that should have been happening, but that is not happening. Why? Because probably there are other factors at play, right? Now let's look at the options. Option A says all people do not respond in the same way to a given economic stimulus. What is the stimulus that is being talked about? We don't know. Okay. Is it the inflation that we are talking about? See, in its purest form, inflation is not a stimulus. Okay. But even if all people do not respond in the same way, there is nothing that explains why a large majority of people in the 1970s saved more and inflation was high. Okay. So this option is illogical. Certain factors, very important, operating in the 1980s but not in the 1970s, diminished people's incentive to save and invest. Okay, so inflation was high, but what happened? They invested more of their income in the 1970s. Okay, so there were other factors in play, and in 1980s, those factors, they diminished the incentive to save and invest. Even if inflation rates were low, probably there were other things, right? Probably the cost of schooling your kids went up, or the cost of housing went up. So you did not even have a lot of money to save and invest. Okay, what happens if suddenly your costs go up? You will not be able to save money, right? So this is a very probable answer for us. Let's look at the other options. The population was larger in the 1980s than it was in the 1970s. Now take a pause. Just spend 10 to 15 seconds and figure out whether you think this is the answer. Okay, so the population is not even a factor. The population could have been large, or the population could have been less. I have been told in absolute terms that people invested more of their income in the 1970s than they did in the 1980s. I do not care what was the size of the population that was there. The proponents of the view cited would stand to gain if inflation rates become lower. See, first of all, there is no proponent of this particular view. Okay, there is a paradox that has been presented. Nobody has really taken sides on a particular view, and we cannot even say that they stand to gain if inflation rates become lower, because they are themselves trying to figure out this paradox. So this also goes out. A factor that affects people's saving behavior in certain way would affect people's investment behavior quite differently. Now it is saying that savings and investment, they are two different factors. Okay, so you cannot club them together. Okay. Now, this is probably in general true or untrue, but we are not bothered with that. This is kind of like a confusing option that they have given. But for this passage, we'll have to assume that saving and investing is one and the same thing. Okay, we do not know better. We might have a lot of information that tells us that, saving and investing are probably different. But in the context of the passage, saving and investing is the same. So this option doesn't go well with the passage itself. Hence, option B becomes your answer. Okay, so as I said, go through the raw reasoning, look at some subtle hints, okay, and try to figure out the answer as quickly as you can. Let's look at another question. It says a company plans to develop a prototype weeding machine that uses cutting blades with optical sensors and microprocessors that distinguish weed from crop plants by differences in shade of color. The inventor of the machine claims that it will reduce labor costs by virtually eliminating the need for manual weeding. Which of the following is a consideration in favor of the company implementing its plan to develop the prototype? Okay, so now what is it trying to say? Now, a company is trying to develop a machine, probably for harvesting, right? Now, harvesting is the process of cutting crops and collecting them for processing. Okay, now this is probably done manually. Till now, the company is developing a machine that will use blades with optical sensors. What will the blade do? It will distinguish weeds from crop plants. Okay, why is it necessary? Because let us say you have a field and you have a lot of crops which are standing in the field, right? In between any crops, you will also have weeds. Now, when you manually cut, what you do is that you leave the weed out, or you cut the weed and throw it away, and you only cut the plant and use it for processing, right? Now, there is a optical sensor on the machine which will look at this, and it will also look at weeds, and it will say that this is crop, so cut and process, and this is weed, so probably throw or cut and throw, whatever. Okay, and how will it do? It will do it by the differences in shade of color. Now the inventor says that it will reduce labor cost because it will eliminate the need for manual weeding. Now, consideration in favor of the company's plan, of the company's implementing its plan to develop the prototype. Okay, so which of the following is the consideration in favor? Now, even before I read the options, let's remember the technique that I talked about. You have a machine that basically has to do a good job if it has to replace manual weeding, right? Manual people are looking at it through their eye. They are able to distinguish what is a weed, what is a crop plant. This machine is probably only going to depend on the color, right? And what would be the consideration in favor of the company implementing its plan? That the machine is accurate. So what happens if the machine keeps cutting both? Okay, the thing that it will harvest will be of bad quality, right? So that will not be something which will be in favor of the development, because it's right now a prototype. Probably to go to mass production, it needs to prove that it is better at weeding out these things. And how is it weeding out? It is looking at the difference between the colors. Now, more the contrast between crop and weed, the easier it will be. If, for example, the crop is green and the weed is red, it will be easy for me to pick out the crop from the weed, as compared to if, let us say, the crop is dark green and the weed is slightly less green. It will become difficult for the microprocessor. Okay, so more the contrast between the two, the easier it will be for the processor to pick up, more will be its accuracy. It will be better at eliminating the need for manual weeding, and hence it will be strengthening the case for development of the prototype. Right? So even before I've read the option, I am trying to decipher what is it that I'm trying to look for. Let's look at option A. There is a considerable degree of variation in shade of color between weeds of different species. Now, take a moment and evaluate this option. Okay. See, we talked about contrast. We talked about the contrast that should be there between the crop and the weed. What is this option saying? It is saying there is a lot of variation in shade of color between weeds of different species. It doesn't help my case, right? I need the difference in weed and the crop, not in two different species of weeds. Okay, this goes out. The shade of color of some plants tends to change appreciably over the course of their growing season. Again, wouldn't this make my life so difficult? If the plant is changing colors every now and then, what will happen? It looked red one day, it will look green the other day. Okay. So what will happen? It will become very difficult for me to calibrate my machine. It will become very, very tough. What do I need? I need a lot of contrast between weed and crop. Let's look at option C. When crops are weeded manually, overall size and leaf shape are taken into account in distinguishing crop plants from weeds. So this is what we were talking about. We were talking about that when humans do it, they would probably be looking at a lot of things: overall size, leaf shape, blah, blah. The machine is only looking at one thing, which is the color. It is not concerned about leaf. It is not concerned about size. Okay. It is only looking at the color. Now humans have this ability to look at factor 1, factor 2, and then color, which is factor 3. So what is this option in favor of? Is it in favor of the companies implementing its plan to develop the prototype? No, it is actually the opposite. It is saying that the manual guys are going to be better, or the manual guys are looking at 3 factors. Your stupid machine is looking at just 1 factor, which ways the humans will be able to see. Humans can see color, they can see leaf shape, they can see overall size, which means humans will be better. Then why do we need the prototype? Okay, so this is exactly the opposite of what we want. Selection and genetic manipulation. I'm reading option D. Selection and genetic manipulation allow plants of virtually any species to be economically bred to have a distinctive shade of color without altering their other characteristics. Now look at this option very carefully. I can do selection and I can do genetic manipulation, and what will that give me? It will give me any species can be economically bred to have distinctive shade of color without altering their other characteristics. All 4 are very important. See, what will the distinctive shade of color do? The distinctive shade of color will help the machine in identifying the crop. Okay, I will say that all the crops are red or all the crops are purple. Okay, because I can manipulate it to grow in any particular color. Okay, but if I do that and in that process the other characteristics change. For example, if let us say I was growing maize and I did this, but the taste of maize changed, will people like it? No, they won't. Right? Just because I wanted it to be easier for optical sensors does not mean I have the liberty to tamper with the other properties of that particular plant. Okay. Now let us say the taste also remained the same and the color was also easy to manipulate. Okay, so we could maintain the taste and we could get all of that in one particular color. If the whole process is very, very expensive, then would I want to do all of this? Probably not. Right? So if the whole thing is economical as well as it does not alter any characteristics and allows me to build a distinctive shade of color, which in turn is going to help me in differentiating between the weed as well as the crop, it's a win-win for me. Okay, this kind of tells me that go ahead and implement the prototype, because what we will do after you build the prototype, we will get all colors to grow in a particular color. Let's look at option E. Farm laborers who are responsible for the manual weeding of crops carry out other agricultural duties at times in the growing season when extensive weeding is not necessary. This is the opposite of what we want. If manual workers are basically useful in other things as well, when extensive weeding is not necessary, then it is not in favor of the company implementing. Because what will I do in the time when I do not need weeding or I do not need manual labor? They are going to help me in some other things. Essentially, it's a kind of like a factor which is in favor of manual laborers. Okay, or if it is in favor of manual laborers, I'm trying to reduce labor cost by eliminating the manual weeding. So if it is in favor of manual weeding, then it is definitely not in my favor. Hence, this option goes out and D becomes your answer. So as you've seen, a lot of times the basic raw thought will help you in identifying the answer. In the course of our future sessions, we are definitely going to see the different types of questions that come in critical reasoning. Stay tuned for the same. Don't forget to subscribe so that you are able to cover all the critical reasoning videos. I've already told you, if you want to cover the reading comprehension part, go and look at videos 1 to 15. Don't forget to like. It really helps in motivating us to put out more content for you. Okay, so I'll see you in the next session. Till then, keep preparing.